Councilmember Yolanda.
Follow your train of thought to being legal and being secure and being not having the cartels come in. You said that most off-site is grown indoors. So where are they supposed to do it in Long Beach?
Certainly, if Long Beach allows it to be done indoors, that's fine. It should be highly regulated. There are a number of health risks and health issues. When someone turns a residential property into a greenhouse, it's not designed for that purpose.
So, okay, so let's follow that train of thought.
Sure.
So if you think we should do it on site or within the city limits, which I think was an option that was given to us last time, then you're recommending either outdoors. Let's see, we have the sports park, we have all operators, maybe Eldorado Park. I don't know where you would do that, outdoors or indoors, in which case I'm not sure if this ordinance or how we would develop a series of restrictions, zoning, ventilation. I mean, getting a cigar ordinance passed was the cigar lounge thing was difficult. I can imagine this. So I'm just trying to figure out how, now in LA, they have to do it on site, right?
That's correct.
They do it in the city of LA or on site where they sell it?
Well, the ordinance was only recently signed by the mayor, so it's not fully into effect.
Okay, but you also said that when they were not doing it on site,
it was all over.
These things happen. Okay, but have you had experience where they've had a history of them doing it on site yet?
No.
So we don't really know if it's better. I mean, the reason I ask is because, I was in the community this weekend actually going door to door, and one of the biggest issues were these marijuana dispensaries. And so I told them, well, we have a couple of outstanding issues that we still need to talk about and decide as policy-making body. And from that, we will get an ordinance hopefully in place pretty soon so that we could start weeding out the bad players and try to have a couple, if we have to, so we don't get sued and for the purposes of the patients, but that we don't really want the proliferation of the dispensaries in our city. I told them, and there's several members of the community as I was walking door to door, that some of the issues that we needed to decide were the cultivation on site or within our city limits or not. Every single one of the members, the neighbors, constituents that I knocked on their door were mouths fell open. Are you kidding? You're actually thinking of letting them grow in the city limits or on site at the dispensaries? Now, I had to caution them and say, well, but the dispensaries may not be there because they'll be, if they're not legal, they're going to close their doors. We may only have a whole lot fewer, hopefully, maybe from the 60 that we have now, because a lot of them will not be able to adhere to the guidelines in the ordinance. They said even if there was one, and it happens to be anywhere near me, my kids, my neighborhood, or my children, or if I have to pass by it knowing that they are growing marijuana on site, they said they feel that is such a risk. And so I could not answer them. So I need lessons learned from you, but you're saying that you really haven't experienced that yet. So there's really nothing to compare it to.
What I would say is one needs to look at it logically, and when someone says, "I fear that the marijuana is going to be near us," the marijuana is going to be there anyway. Whether it's stuck in the ground or it's in a vial or it's under a glass display case, the marijuana is going to be present.
Exactly, but the problem is when you have to grow enough for a supply, you have more than what would be there just if you were selling the little vials or the cigarettes or whatever it is they sell. So I guess my concern is I can't, there was nothing I could tell my constituents when I went to their door to make them feel safe. Their first reaction was, oh my God, it's going to be grown in our city. Well, where? I don't know. And I guess that's the big question, is where and how. But I do have a couple of other questions. You had mentioned that, I guess I need to ask you, how are they getting their inventory now?
Through vendors.
Okay. Are you stopping? Okay, if they're getting their inventory through vendors and they're buying it from outside the city or outside their own little store or whatever, dispensary or collective, well, it's within the collective because they're supposed to be buying from their collective members, then are you guys at the border stopping all these people and arresting them?
Well, I'm an attorney, and I work downtown, but no, I'm not at the border trying to arrest
Because
people.
either one of two
But
things that's happening is either law enforcement is not targeting them, not effective, or their cases aren't holding up in court. Because if that's the case, they would be out of business if you really did, if you were able to do your job. Because if you're saying that if they bought it from outside the county, outside the city, or whatever, and we have this patchwork of laws, one allowing, one not allowing, one this or that, or different kinds of levels of legality, then I would think that you would be able to somehow figure out how it's getting here and arrest them before they get here and bust them. So I can have some stuff in my back of my car and say I'm going to sell it to a collective that I'm a member of, and you wouldn't stop and arrest me?
Well, if we could do what you just suggested, we wouldn't have cocaine, methamphetamine, or heroin in Los Angeles either. But it's a very difficult proposition to take on those that want to import narcotics into Los Angeles and know where to meet them at the border to prevent them from
All
getting
you have to
here.
do is stand in the parking lot. All you have to do, if you really wanted to bust these people, all you have to do is sit in the parking lot, and as they go in to deliver it, bust them. I mean, they must be a bag that they carry that takes into the store.
Hey, excuse me, if I hear one more comment, you will be removed.
So I guess
be civil here.
Sorry. So my concern is I'm trying to figure out what the difference in security is if they get it from outside, if they get it off-site or even off, because I think at the last ordinance we talked about, well, you could have, it said, the distribution of medical marijuana could take place at two distinct locations in the city, one to grow and one to sell, I guess, something like that. And so we were talking about, well, okay, if we don't do it just on site, maybe we could do it within city limits. So if someone has one cultivation site and one dispensary selling, I don't know what to call them anymore, but it's like a storefront to sell it and one location to grow it. So if they grow it on one side and drive it over to the other side, you could still bust them and it's within city limits, and we'll still be technically growing on site then.
On a strict interpretation of California law, that's correct.
So then either way, if they don't have it in their back room,
but if the city is going to draft an ordinance that's going to allow it, I would venture to guess law enforcement of that city will enforce the city's ordinance, which is what is happening in Los Angeles. I think it's important to note, and I understand your position on, well, why has it not happened before? And I think the answer to that is in Los Angeles, we didn't have an ordinance for years. There was no real regulation in the city, and law enforcement wasn't sure what they could or could not do. Now that there is, in fact, an ordinance in place, it has not taken full effect yet. It's very hard to compare. And I understand what your concerns are, but it makes it very hard to compare when it hasn't really gone into effect yet.
Exactly, and that's my concern. It's hard for me to explain to constituents that, hey, don't worry, because it's on site, we're all going to be much safer, and I don't know how to tell them.
But I think logically it's hard to argue with the difficulties that law enforcement will face.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but I'll say this. It's hard to explain how you're not busting them now when we see them walking into the dispensaries with bags of stuff. And so you're saying we're going to be safer somehow if they grow it on site? I mean, at this point, or grow it within the city limits? At this point, if you're not busting them now when it's illegal, now that we're making an ordinance that makes it legal, then I don't get it. But I do have just three more questions.
Before you do, finish your point, Mr. Rosito.
Well, I think it's important to note that you're focusing in on one particular aspect of the overall position on off-site cultivation, which is, are people going to be safer? I think the real question is, it allows your city an opportunity to know who's cultivating, know where they're cultivating, and to permit law enforcement to regulate it when they need to without a great expense to the city by forcing them to go find the cultivation location someplace outside of your city, outside of the county, or outside of the state.
Thank you. And I would submit that the only thing my constituents care about is whether they're going to be safer. So making your job easier isn't exactly my job. My job is to make my constituents feel safe.